O Lord of hosts, be with us, for we have none other help in times of adversity but Thee. O Lord of hosts, have mercy on us.
What is New Age spirituality? Well, the New Age gets thrown around a lot. People see astrology, the use of tarot, women and men rubbing crystals, and say, oh my gosh, all this New Age spirituality. Well, where does this stuff come from? New Age spirituality is a sort of contemporary 19th century, 20th century movement, of which is now in full blossom here in the 21st century, which is a sort of amalgamations of a lot of different things. We're talking about spiritualism, new thought, theosophy, even mesmerism aspects, and generally characterized by its relationship to the human potential movement. Okay, so it's an eclectic, unsystematic, in a way, I would argue, as somebody who was once in the New Age and now out of it, it's an incredibly consumeristic spirituality because of its eclectic nature. And we will get into aspects of its epistemology and ethics, of which it claims no objective standard, and always talks about being a sort of inclusive spirituality. That this eclectic nature allows New Age to grab ideas and principles from all over the world, whether it be Hinduism or Shintoism or Nordic paganism or Amazonian shamanism or contemporary UFO religions. All this stuff has a foot in the New Age world. There really is no specific definition for the New Age. And that's where I would highlight the best book, if you really want to get into like the academic study of what exactly New Age spirituality is. It's this one right here, New Age Religion and Western Culture, Esotericism in the Mirror of Secular Thought by Valter Hanograph. For those in the know, Valter Hanograph is generally regarded one of the premier top scholars in the field of Western esoteric tradition. So certainly not coming from a Christian bias. Obviously, yeah, I'm an Orthodox Christian. So I've already seen a few people leave some nasty comments because I'm a Christian, and Christianity, especially traditional Christianity, is very much in opposition to some of the fundamental tenets of New Age spirituality because they reject the notion of an objective good and evil, that it's all on a sort of general spectrum of positive growth. So some are on a lower end of the spectrum, some are on the higher, but they definitely disregard any concept of sin or guilt. And this is one of the New Age criticisms of Christianity. So I've already seen this levied, so I'm sure we're going to see more of this evening. Okay, it's par for the course. But Valter Hanograph is a Western esoteric scholar. And so he approaches, and this is actually his dissertation, this book right here. Very, very, very good work. If you want to get a sort of systematic breakdown of different dimensions, the history, the overall worldview, many of the movers and shakers that have helped define New Age spirituality. Because like I said, it's an amalgamation of many things. It's hard to put your finger on what exactly the New Age is. So it's an eclectic, consumeristic amalgamation and appropriation of beliefs, practices, ideas, concepts from all over the world's traditions. It's been greatly influenced by the human potential movement, in which the New Age is characterized by this idea that you are not who you should be, that you actually have a higher self. And this higher self, if you were to become this person through the ridding yourself of trauma or Christian guilt or the understanding of sin, that you may be able to have supernatural abilities. And this is going to come into, when we get to it, their cosmic Christ Christology, because much of New Age, and even Valter Hanograph highlights in this book, very interesting. The New Age is very much characterized as a rejection of traditional Christianity and the Christian worldview. However, he even highlights that Jesus Christ takes a unique position within the New Age, higher than the Buddha, higher than Lao Tzu, higher than Muhammad, as the epitome of who you and I can become. And so they have a sort of Aryan Christology, but the idea is that you and I have all these supernatural abilities to heal, to be clairvoyant, to see into the future, to, again, have all types of supernatural phenomenon, that if only you were to become your higher self. And so New Age spirituality is built upon the principle that by using these different practices from around the world, you can develop yourself and you can become who society, the culture, the world is preventing you to be. And this leads into the next dimension of it. So it's greatly influenced by the human potential movement, in which the entire New Age worldview is built on the premise that you are not achieving the full human potential. And there's various reasons, depending on who you're listening to, which guru, which teacher, which ascended master. Shout out to Crispy Rothschild. Whatever ascended master you're listening to, there's a lot of explanations as to why you're not your full potential. But it's built upon and influenced greatly by the 1960s human potential movement. And therefore, it's built on Western esoteric traditions. It's also very closely related to what are called UFO religions, because it rejects Darwinian concepts of evolution and adopts what's generally called a more creative evolution. And that evolution is teleologically oriented, again, towards us developing these higher potentials, because they wouldn't talk about the fall in the same way, but they certainly would be, they would describe us current reality as somehow no longer part of this pure unity that would characterize sort of prehistory or a beginning cosmology of some sort. And so it's influenced by the human potential movement, UFO religion, occultism, spiritualism, New Thought, Theosophy, tons of different strands of Western esoteric traditions. And so it claims to be a holistic spirituality unique for the present moment in the world, because again, for them, they're adopting evolution, and they say this is all teleologically oriented for the development of our spiritual selves. And so it's a holistic understanding of the mind, body, and soul, if you will, or they would say spirit typically. And so they believe that divinity pervades the entire universe, all humanity, all things. It's very generous. It's not a person, so they do not understand God as a personal God. They certainly do not believe God to be a trinity. So a very different concept of God, but very much in the orientation of the authority of the self. So it's not about tradition. This is what allows them to get away with their consumeristic behaviors and appropriating this belief and that belief and this practice, is that they're rejecting tradition as a whole. And also, quite explicitly, they reject the idea of scriptural revelation. So this would be a knock at the Rig Veda, the Bible, the Quran, any text, any spiritual text that would claim to be revealed. New Age spirituality tends to reject, or they would associate it in the same category as channeling, because we're going to listen to a few of these New Age gurus who are channelers, and so they believe in the channeling as a way in which we then, fulfilling and becoming more of our full selves, can come in contact with these spiritual helpers, which again, they don't believe there's demons per se, that there's just various beings on the spectrum of becoming your perfect self. All of that then is understood why it's called the New Age. Why is the New Age spirituality called the New Age? It's called the New Age because they believe that this is part and parcel of the new astrological age that we're in, the age of Aquarius. And so New Age spirituality is built upon the belief that the astrological ages and the astrological cycles are indicative of your historical period. So you've probably heard people talk about the ram's horn and Moses, the age of Pisces and Christ, and now the age of Aquarius, the age in which all secrets are revealed, utopia, we become the fullest version of our spiritual selves. We're able to finally evolve and advance. This is the New Age. When did the New Age start? Well, again, depending on who you ask. A lot of New Age gurus, some have pointed to the 1967, when a lot of these ideas got going in the 1960s counterculture. Some point to 1987, that this was a cosmological convergence. At some point to 2012, that the end of the Mayan calendar, what it was really highlighting was the end of all the historical ages and into the age of Aquarius. This is the general worldview. So what is New Age spirituality? It's all those beliefs and practices under the understanding that we are now entering in, and we are in the age of Aquarius, the age of enlightenment. And so, what is its spiritual paradigm? I want to break down some of the nuances of its spiritual paradigm, and then we're going to get straight into all these videos. So, smash that like for everybody who's here. The paradigm, number one, you can't understand New Age spirituality with first understanding the importance of the self, the higher self, and individualism. It's incredibly individualistic, even though it's all about collective understandings, communal orientation, these types of things. But the point is, you can't impose your spirituality on anybody else. So the individual is the sole authority of spiritual teachings. This is an important, crucial dimension of the spiritual paradigm of the New Age. You get to determine what is true and what is false, and no other New Ager necessarily gets to impose their worldview on you. This is part and parcel of why it's liberative. Now, again, you can already see the sort of relativistic presuppositions embedded there, but this allows individuals to appropriate whatever they like. You got more of an occult flavor, you can appropriate all those ideas. I got more of, an Eastern mystical flavor, especially Chinese. Okay, well, you can do the Confucian, the Taoism thing, add a little Chan Buddhism in there, add a little Western, Western Enlightenment ideals, whatever it may be. Oh, okay, you're into more traditional, like pagan shamanist. Yeah, you can appropriate that. It's all up to the individual. And all the adoption of these practices characterized by tools for personal growth. Again, remember I said it's greatly influenced by the human potential movement of the 1960s. So why does the New Ager appropriate all these ideas? Because they aid in the development of personal growth, spiritual growth. That's the entire purpose. Therefore, that's why they can get away with, oh, well, we don't believe in sin and guilt and demonic entities. No, it's all on a spectrum of personal growth. So, therefore, there is no one way. It's immensely and very explicit in its perennialism, that it believes that all religions sort of lead to the same mountaintop, as we've talked about. And one of the problems philosophically with perennialism, whether you think that some religions have truth or some have more truth, perennialism, characterized by the idea, is that essentially all religions are equal, but have maybe are different parts of the mountain, right? They get you to different points, but they all kind of point to the same mountaintop. This idea is inherently relativistic in regards to epistemology, because when we ask the question, how do you know that? On what basis of knowledge base, on what epistemological grounds can you say that Buddhism, that believes in the anatman, the lack of a soul, is saying the same thing as Christianity, which is explicitly saying you do have a soul, which is explicitly the same thing as Islam, which is rejecting the divinity of Christ, which is essentially the same thing as psychedelic shamanism, which is all about the alteration of consciousness to contact spirits. How can you say all these things are the same thing when there's inherent contradictions in their own premises and presuppositions? You can't. And this is why even the traditionalist school has kind of fallen out of favor, even though since the postmodern turn, again, according to the postmoderns and the postmodern turn epistemology, we can't actually believe in grand narratives. And so you can't say your religion is better than somebody else's religion. New Age spirituality is absolutely in step with this. So there is no one way. It's explicitly perennialistic, and in this way, it's explicitly relativistic. It's subjectivistic because, again, you are the sole authority determining what's good and bad for you in the development of your higher self and your supernatural abilities. And so they define it, many pro-New Agers will define it as a spirituality without borders, or as you've heard me say, a spirituality without boundaries. And this dissolution of boundaries is the sort of dissolution of chaos, but the dissolution of the ability to think clearly, objective use of the laws of logic, mathematics, and all this different stuff. So how can we get to a place where 2 + 2 = 4 is white supremacist? Well, it has to do with this idea that the emphasis on objectivity and the philosophical justification for such things is part of this dominator culture, which it is rejecting. It also has no dogmas. The only dogma in New Ageism is that it's against dogmas, which again is ironic and a paradox, just like it rejecting universal narratives as a universal narrative. You see the contradiction there. If you reject that objective truth is real, how can you tell me that objective truth isn't real? That's claiming an objective truth. Inherent contradiction. The same thing is true in the New Age in regards to dogmas. They inherently reject the existence of spiritual dogmas as, in fact, a spiritual dogma. That is essential to New Ageism. The next one is their conception of God. The New Age worldview is what they call inclusivistic, universal approach and accepting all perspectives except explicitly traditional Christianity, but they would probably say traditional religions, although they'd be much, much more accommodating to anything other than traditional Christianity. So in regards to God, God is usually associated ambiguously. It can be consciousness. It can be even panpsychic, like a cosmic mind, a universal mind of some sort. But New Age spirituality is built on many Platonic presuppositions. So like the ideal forms, the idea that the non-physical is better than the physical. It's kind of interesting because much of their worldview is a defense of, again, forms of sexuality, transgenderism, again, bodily experience itself. But because of the emphasis on God being associated with consciousness or mind, there is a subtle Platonic dimension to it, like the higher self, like that everybody has a higher self. The idea that you and I are existing right now and we have all this trauma, this baggage, we're moving through space and time, and that we need to then commune with our higher self to understand what to do next. That is very Platonic in the idea that there's an ideal form and then there's an imperfect form that's present within matter. Again, whether they're conscious of it or not, we can see the Platonic presuppositions there. So for them, God is ambiguous, God is universal, God is explicitly not a person, and it's generally described in the context of mind or consciousness. Now, their cosmology. New Age spirituality believes that the cosmos was originally purely unified, right? There was like a divine unity. We can see, again, another Platonic or even Neoplatonic presupposition there, the idea and privileging of unity over multiplicity. And so they believe that what's happening through cosmic evolution, biological evolution, is that the universe, of which you and I are part of, only if we become part of our higher selves, we can see this universal perspective that the universe is developing these multiple forms, and then it's evolving and coming back to itself. You are this sort of conscious dimension of the universe, you see. And so they believe in what's called creative evolution. This is different than random mutation for the survival of the fittest. That would be characterized of like Darwinian Wallace theory of evolution. Theirs is more characterized by a teleologically oriented, meaning that at the end of time, the purpose is the development towards these higher spiritual ideals, and that's the point of what they call creative evolution. So they also believe, despite this creative evolution, that matter is generally an illusion. And so even though they emphasize things like explicit forms of sexuality, various forms of embodied spirituality, embodied practices, they generally adopt the sort of Sanskrit concept of Maya, that the world itself is an illusion, or we're in a simulation. You'll hear many New Age people talk about the simulation or the matrix that we're in. This is part and parcel of their sort of cosmological worldview. And so the goal then for the New Ager is to develop a relationship with spirit. Which spirit? The Holy Spirit, the world spirit, the Gaian spirit? They don't define it. Again, it can be any of these spirits. So they're explicitly not defining which spirit it is, but they are always talking about spirit, the great spirit. And so if it or they, the spirits, because New Age spirituality is all about contacting higher spiritual entities. This is why it's okay with inebriants, so ayahuasca, psychedelics, DMT, psilocybin mushrooms, LSD, any of the tryptamine molecules are going to be generally celebrated as ways in which they can be spiritual tools to contact spiritual entities which love you and want to help you. Because remember, there are no demonic entities. They're only entities that are lesser in regards to their higher self. And so channeling is a common practice. And as I said, they would much more prefer contemporary channeling over revealed scripture, because they would argue, because of their creative evolutionary worldview, that, oh, if the Rig Veda or the Bible or the Quran is revealed, well, all those were historical, and those were the same things as channeling. Therefore, I'm less interested in that. I'm more interested in what Bashar or Abraham Hicks or, name a modern day channeler, what they have to say, because that's contemporary. That's us contacting the spirits today. That's what I want to listen to. And so New Age spirituality is very much oriented around the contacting of spirits. And this is why then they adopt a cosmic Christ Christology. As Valter Hanograph highlights in this book, they very, very much talk about Christ quite often as a sort of cosmic archetype of who you and I could be if we listen to our higher selves and develop our spiritual abilities. So they have an Aryan Christology of Christ, but Christ is uniquely, even in the New Age worldview, a sort of the ultimate spiritual teacher. And he is who we are all to become. They'll highlight things like Luke chapter 22:10, where it talks about Christ telling the apostles to find the upper room. This is where, again, the Eucharist is established before the crucifixion. This is where the apostles were told to meet, and they will reinterpret this through their hermeneutics, which is totally relativistic. So they'll reinterpret the Bible. They'll reject this. They'll accept this. Again, the consumerism is highly fundamental to this New Age spiritual worldview, but they'll say, oh, that's talking about the age of Aquarius. You see, Christ is telling you to follow the man with the water pitcher because that's Aquarius, and he's telling you that this is how you get to the new upper room, which is really, again, your mind and the sort of Gnostic faculties of understanding what's going on here. So they'll also highlight Luke 22:10. They'll talk about Matthew 6:22 in regards to making your eye single, which I've talked about before. That, again, as Orthodox Christians, the people who actually put the Bible together, that has to do with our anthropology of the nous, the eye of the soul, the eye of the heart, our noetic faculties, the mind being something different than understood in typical Western context. So has nothing to do with the pineal gland, of which, again, you can check out my interview with Dr. David E. Nichols, again, world-renowned neuropharmacologist, which had basically debunked the idea that the pineal gland can produce significant amounts of dimethyltryptamine, DMT. It can't. The pineal gland's all about the regulation of melatonin. It's about your sleep cycles, and there's no even function for the pineal gland to produce significant amounts of dimethyltryptamine that would be neurologically active. It's false. It's a total myth. But they'll use that to then talk about, oh, you see Christ in Matthew 6:22. He's talking about the pineal gland, bro. He's talking about making your eye single, bro. Interesting. Yes. So they adopt Christ, but use this sort of cosmic Christ understanding, where Christ then is the sort of personification of who we would be if we actually became fully enlightened. Because he has the supernatural abilities. He has godlike divinity. He can heal. He can help the world. He's full of wisdom. That's who you could be. And so, therefore, all of this is about entering the age of Aquarius. Each historical period, they're explicit, is characterized by the astrological age. And so there's a wide variety of opinions and expectations of what they should expect in the age of Aquarius, because, again, there is no unified systematic structure to the New Age. And so non-human forces in the age of Aquarius will help us spiritually evolve during this time. This is why, although we would agree with the New Age in regard to their next dimension, is that they definitely prefer alternative forms of healing, there's a significant amount of New Agers that didn't get the jab, right? The jibby jab. They were able to avoid myocarditis, pericarditis, and blood clots. However, they're going to be much, much, much more susceptible to fall in line in regard to the transhumanist agenda and the UFO agenda. So again, I reject the idea that these UFOs or the little munchkin men that were revealed at the Mexican Congress, right, within their government. Give me a break. Okay. It looked like a paper mache entity, but the New Age spirituality, they're going to be less reluctant to accept the jibby jab due to their high skepticism of Big Pharma, rightfully so. And I think that's where we as traditional Christians, we would actually, and New Agers, we'd be right on board in regards to the belief that big pharma and traditional Western medicine is corrupt. We absolutely agree there. However, they are going to be much, much more susceptible to adopting the UFO agenda, the one world religion, transhumanism, all these types of things that are at hand. So there's that. So entering the age of Aquarius, they believe that non-human entities. So you can see then where the rhetoric that the extraterrestrials are going to come from the Pleiades and that they're going to save us from our nuclear war. This actually plays into New Age spirituality quite well. As I said, they're very skeptical of big pharma, and so they prefer alternative forms of healing. All disease for a New Ager is spiritual. All disease is spiritual. Therefore, if you're sick, it's probably due to you and spiritual attacks on you, or your inability to spiritually progress. So, this is part and parcel of their worldview, and therefore you are to become your own shaman. You can see again why Christ is a privileged archetype, because he heals. You have to become your own healer by your ingratiation and communication with these spiritual entities, which again, they can't demarcate if it's a good or bad because they don't believe in objective good or bad. And so you contact these entities and they're going to help you evolve. And so, you become your own shaman so that you can explore your own consciousness and you can come to higher understandings, develop yourself, and grow mentally, physically, and spiritually. In regards to their ethics and morals, this is my last point that I will make, and then we're going to get into these videos. So smash this like. Ethics and morals, they have no cohesion and no objective claim to right or wrong. They explicit. Most teachers, now they'll use rhetoric talking about right or wrong. For example, they'll be very critical. They'll be in support of things like social justice, BLM, a lot of the modern day progressive ideologies, and they'll talk about justice and what we need to do for the planet, climate change, right? We're killing the planet. We need less people to be born. You should probably become sterile or just change your gender. Do any of these things. So you can see a lot of it will go along with the general narratives at hand, but they have no objective standard for right or wrong, and they're explicit about this, and they believe that there is no such thing as good and evil. They reject this implicitly and state that this is part of Christianity's hindrance to your own spiritual evolution. So therefore, they do not believe in sin. They do not believe in sin, and they directly go out of their way to talk about Christianity instantiating guilt into people, which is harming their spiritual progression. So you can't sin in a New Age spiritual worldview. You can only move away from your higher potential. But even if you move away from your higher potential, there's nothing really wrong with it. It's just your free choice, bro. That's just what you chose to do. So you get what you choose, right? Because it's all about your choice. You are the sole authority. And this is why it's incredibly, really narcissistic and egotistical, because it's all about the worship of your own self-preferences, your spiritual preferences. This New Age worldview, because it's a lack of objective ethics, morals, and epistemology, it just allows you to accept anything. Whatever you prefer is good for you. And so no judging, no guilt, no sin. This is explicit with the New Age spirituality. And so everything is about pursuing the positive. Everything is about moving to higher levels. And in fact, reincarnation then is an explicit belief within New Age spirituality. What happens after you die? They don't really get into much details, but what they will do is explicitly talk about reincarnation and that your higher self chooses. So are you going to be a tree, a dog, or have the perfect life in your next reincarnation? Well, you don't know this, but your higher self does. And so what you need to do, you guys need to pray, you need to meditate, you need to get in an altered state, you need to contact your higher self, because your higher self knows what it's going to choose. And this is kind of their cop out there. But karma, though they definitely believe in karma, it's much more of a Western version of like cause and effect, where karma is immediately happening right now. Within a Hindu or Dharmic worldview, karma, and Dharmic, I mean all the Dharma religions of India, a Dharmic worldview, karma is happening in each life cycle, right? It's much more expansive. The time of karma is much more imperceptible to us, where in the West, people have adopted this concept and made it more immediate. So, oh, your lottery ticket hit this week, that's good karma. You did something good. This isn't what a Hindu would generally think, because karma is much more expansive on the time frame. But certainly that's present within the New Age. And so the last point is, why is New Age spirituality so popular in the West? I would say because it's incredibly mystical. It's characterized by its irrationality. It's characterized by its mysticism. It's characterized by its relationship with these spirits. This is something that I think Protestantism lacked. And I've talked about this before, that Protestant Christianity, as it moved into the West, there are no Protestant nations that are still Christian. Northern Germany, Sweden, England, America, Canada. I mean, America would be the most explicitly Christian based on the professing of the people. But I mean, look at our culture. Look at what people do. Look at the artists. I mean, are we a Christian nation? I think we would struggle to make that claim, even though many people may say they are. And so Protestantism is characterized by its inherent rationality, its rational apprehension of Scripture, its rational exegetical techniques of Scripture, telling you who Jim Bob or some random Joe Blow in his local church on the corner, he's telling you about what you have to do. And you just have to make a proclamation of faith with Jesus, and you're good to go. There is no traditionalism in Protestantism. There is no singular authority throughout time. And we can see the same precepts in New Age spirituality, but New Age spirituality affords more of the consumer tendencies to the spiritual practitioner, because they can accommodate and appropriate more of whatever they like, and allows more freedom, and it does away with the concepts of sin. It does away with the concepts of guilt. It does away with the concepts of a divine incarnation of Jesus Christ as God. But I think the presuppositions of Protestantism lay nicely in that New Age occultism is a really luring spiritual alternative for so many Westerners. And so that's what I want to say about that. And wrapping up, what exactly is the New Age spiritual paradigm?